And it's welcome to episode 24 of We Love Ugly Data, the Deep Analysis podcast, or I get it right this time, series 4, episode 2, if you're calculating them that way. I'm here. Alan's here. Hi, Alan.
Hello.
Those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. This means now, I think, episode 24, there's a whole 12 hours of back episodes you could go to. You could do a long transatlantic flight and only listen to this podcast if you really wanted to. I wouldn't suggest you did, but you could. For those of you new, welcome. We have 3 topics. We tried to keep it for roughly 30 minutes. People who have been here before said to themselves, Matt, why didn't you say parts of the format is to say the format? I'm saying that now. Part of the format, 3 topics, 30 minutes. Let's get into it. This time we have a new MMI available. So a piece of market research came out just before Christmas. We did it in association with Hyland this time. Rather than go through the whole thing, obviously we want to encourage you to download the report, or particularly Hyland would like you to download the report. We'd like you to download the report too, because we work very hard with Hyland to produce it. We'll come to how you do that a little bit later on. What I thought we would do for this portion of the podcast is to pick out a couple of the statistics in it that I think are particularly interesting, and they're maybe not the ones which are being used to promote the survey, because there's a lot in here. There's a lot of data in here, and obviously when you're writing a press release or you're doing some kind of highlight packages, you haven't necessarily going to pull out everything. So I thought they would pull out the bits and pieces. So new market momentum index, which is our kind of trademark name for our market analysis products, and this time it's on artificial intelligence and intelligent automation. Intelligent automation being automation with AI, if you like. So whenever you see that within it, it means automation that's powered or informed in some way by AI. Just to give you an idea of what's in it, there's basically a bunch of research data with some trends that came out of the research data, and then some other themes and trends that we've picked out. So what I decided to do for this is pick one off from the analysis of research data section and one from the trends and themes section. So you're getting a selection of them. I don't know where the selection, ones with soft centers, caramels, toffees. I'm not sure what your favorite ones in. I'm always the coffees and strawberries and raspberry creams and that kind of stuff out the boxes of chocolates, but I don't know what these count for. I don't know what I'm talking about. Let's get into the data. So first question, actually, it's actually question 43 within the survey, but that's not really important. We asked which of the following apply if you are considering or currently using AI to automate your business activities. So we gave people a bunch of multi-select options, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 multi-select options to say which of these apply to support the reasons you're already using AI. Variety of different results, and they're kind of interesting. But the one that I picked out, particularly when I wrote the analysis of it, is the poorest scoring result amongst all of them is actually the first one in the graphic on the screen, which is not enough people to do the work. Now that means, in this case, only 10% of respondents selected not enough people to do the work. We can surmise from that the one thing from this set of respondents is it is not a shortage of workers that's driving AI and intelligent automation projects. Alan, when we started to pull that data out, that was kind of interesting, and we both pulled it out right away and went, that's not what we would expect.
Yeah, I mean, what we try and do with any of this kind of survey data is be neutral, right? I mean, we don't. The problem with surveys is often that they're skewed before anybody does the survey.
Yeah.
So this was a surprise. I think it's a couple of things. There was a couple of surprises actually on this question, but yeah, I mean, we've heard so many times over the past number of years that we can't hire people. There's not enough people. We'll have to. Well, apparently that's not what's really happening. And in fact, the people who've been saying that haven't actually been enterprises or government departments. They've been vendors. Well, the vendors were wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. A call forward a little bit to maybe when we'll get, because we have to talk by law by agents or the police come. That's kind of like the rule in 2024. 2025, I forgot what year it was. So we'll hint to that. But one of the kind of high level things driving agents were, hey, you haven't got enough people to do this stuff. The agents can do it for you. And what these results are telling us is that, only 10% of people picked out not enough people to do the work. However, let's look at the ones that they're really pushing. And the highest scoring one there was improved quality access to knowledge and data, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I know we're going to pick this up in the next section.
Indeed.
That combined with the other high scorer, which was improve access to knowledge and data. I mean, it's almost comical, isn't it? I mean, that tells you a lot about this. Those two stats there tell you a lot about just how bad things are in a lot of organizations when it comes to data, be it unstructured or structured data for that matter.
Yeah, so for those of you who can't see the screen, and of course, if you don't see the screen, a good way to follow this data is to download the report, more of which in a moment. But 58% was improved data, improved access to knowledge and data. 63% was improved quality of knowledge and data, and improved ways of working with legacy systems was 51%. So over half of people went, this is a way in which we can, improve access to data on legacy systems. So across the board here, it gives you something of an insight into how difficult organizations find it just keeping track of their internal data.
Yeah, and just coincidentally, because it's also Hyland, I spoke at Hyland's sales kickoff in Cleveland a couple of weeks ago. As a lot of people there, and many people I spoke to a lot anyway. But in particular, that's a stat that really will not surprise any of Hyland or OpenText or Box's partners, right?
Yeah.
But this is historically, though, I think there's always been a disconnect between the vendors and the people who actually go out, do the consulting and implement. And so I hope this stat and these figures here help bridge that gap a little bit, just bring a bit of reality to it. People have got legacy applications. They're not working very well. They can't find stuff to get the job done.
And that's across the board. And one of the areas that's been heavily pushed with agents, which is one of the reasons actually the question went into this additional question went into the survey, was healthcare. Use cases around healthcare and appointment booking and referrals, and these are all things. These are all real use cases. But if we look at the healthcare breakout from this, healthcare actually was the lowest scoring of the not enough people do the work. Across the survey, it was 10%. Within healthcare, it was only 6%. So only 6% of the people from the healthcare saying the issue is with people. They are saying the issue is with systems, and particularly access to data within those systems. So even though right, that healthcare is an important area, and obviously healthcare, government, financial services, and insurance were the four breakout sub-industries we looked at for this survey. But insurance, funny enough, was the highest. Insurance came in about 12-13% for this question, but healthcare was only 6%. So, but there's still a reasonable similarity across those four breakouts. So actually, this is the lowest. It was the lowest scoring across the board.
Yeah.
So the second thing I wanted to pull out was, funnily enough, some stuff around data. We did some work on this last year a little bit, another survey, and I'll refer back to that in a little bit, just in case if you haven't seen it, that individual report. But something we wanted to understand was, one, was data really important to organizations? And we want to basically get some numbers on that. So thinking about intelligent automation, so automation with AI, to what extent does internal content, so the stuff that you're storing inside your organization, play an important part? And unsurprisingly, I guess within that, 60%, close to 60%, that it plays a large part. 22% was a major part. 16% is some part. If you add those together, you end up with an overwhelming amount saying data is at least in some part important. And if you take major and large, even again, it's an overwhelming majority that says, hey, it's a really important part of what we do.
And I think because on the one hand, you would say, well, duh.
Yeah, of course, well, duh.
But on the other hand, we've had at least a year now of, in fact, I was talking on a webinar yesterday about this, about, generative AI, large language models. Just use ours, don't worry about your old stuff. You could label it and you could do this and you could use RAG, but don't worry, our data, in other words, external data, is really important. But so on the one hand, it's a duh, but on the other hand, as we know, this is probably the number one reasons intelligent automation, AI projects stumble.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they haven't given it the data has not been given the importance and the love it needs, and without it, it won't work. And as we found out when we asked, or was it question 34 here, that you know, they can't do projects because they've had to exclude data because it's not of good enough quality.
Yeah, let's just be specific about that for people who can't see the screen. So what the follow-up question to this, or a follow-up question to this was, when considering the content design of these projects, so referring to the intelligent automation projects, did any system have to be excluded because the content was unsuitable, dirty, unclassified, insecure? So basically, did you have to leave any stuff out because it wasn't good enough or you couldn't trust it, right? 15% said yes, many, 44% yes, several, 24% at least one, right? So we had 15% no, and the 3% weren't sure. So it means that, you know, well over 70% had to exclude one system. So it had to be a key system because they were acknowledging that they wanted to use it for this automation. They had to exclude it because the data wasn't good enough. 44% was several, 50% was many. Many systems had to be excluded. This is not good.
No, it's not, and it's a minor point, and I'm not saying this just to correct you. It's not only over 70%; it's actually 83%. I mean, 83% couldn't do what they wanted to do. They had to exclude sets of data because they were dirty data. Yep. They were insecure. They weren't suitable. There was poor quality. I mean, talk about a roadblock. That's massive.
Yeah, and particularly let's remember what maybe back to what we talked about in the last podcast. When we're talking about this stuff being deployed for AI and particularly for agents, even though we're not there and we might not actually ever get there, what is being proposed is autonomy. We're talking about things which are potentially autonomous, making decisions based on data. And what we're saying here is a big portion of the data on which we would ideally make those decisions cannot be included because it's not good enough.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's the case. I mean, we're always talking about how things are overhyped. I always try and balance that. I always say to people, look, the technology isn't the problem. The technology is pretty good. I mean, we've both seen so many examples of technology over the last 5-6 years or whatever that we just couldn't have imagined 10-15 years ago. I mean, the technology is amazing today, but the data is rubbish. The processes aren't properly mapped, and without those two things, I don't care how good the technology is, it won't work.
Well, indeed. So there's a lot in this. So that's just two questions or two sets of questions out of a much larger report we can download from Hyland. The URL's on the screen. All the stuff will be in the show notes. If you're new, you didn't know that, there's no excuse. If you're here before, you're sick of me mentioning show notes, but I'm going to keep mentioning them. All the links to all the stuff we mentioned in here will be in the show notes, so you can click on. So you don't have to take notes now. I tried to remember things, but yeah, this is downloadable from Hyland for free in exchange for the normal contact details. Also, I mentioned it a little bit earlier on. Last year, we did a previous MMI along with M-Files and AIM on AI and unstructured data management. There's obviously some crossovers between the two MMIs. We'll put the URL so you can download that. That's got another wealth of data. We talked about this in the previous podcast and we pulled out the data. If I can remember what episode that is, I will put the link to the episode in as well. So there is no excuse for you not to be absolutely expert in your organization for pulling up statistics, real statistics, defensible statistics that you can pull up in meetings to say, hey, well, the analysis says.
I'll go a step further, and yes, it's bragging, but been doing this job of an analyst for a very long time. Those two reports, there hasn't been anything like them in years. It's as simple as that. They are real. That is brand new research. It's ethically done. It's defensible. There's a proper methodology. And if you're in this industry, it doesn't matter whether you're an M-Files client, an AIM member, a Hyland customer, or you're a deep analysis, download them.
Yep.
They're really good.
There's a lot of work there, and you can have it for free. Topic 2. Remember some of those things we talked about in topic 1? They're coming back. But topic 2, I am paraphrasing LL Cool J here. Don't call it a comeback. Enterprise search, Alan. You wrote a blog post last month in January, just after the last podcast, about how enterprise search is a revival and what lessons we can take from them. We talked a little bit about in topic 1, a little bit about access to information and access to knowledge is still a pressing issue for organizations. What prompted you in January 2025 to start talking about this again?
Well, because it's that terrible phrase, isn't it? Deja vu all over again, right? I first started covering enterprise search 1999, 2000, and on and off over the years, I'm one of only a handful who've ever covered search. It's just a niche within a niche within a niche, and so it gets overlooked all the time. But the big thing was two things here actually. The first time I even came across, the first time I even came across the term LLM, right, and large language models and that stuff, was actually in the briefings with search vendors before all of the craziness of OpenAI, etc. So they were the first ones out there doing this. But the second part of it, which is interlinked, is it's a phrase I've used so many times over the years, but search was moving, has been moving from a long time, from pull to push, right? Pull being you type in, I want to find this document, or I want to get help on this topic, or whatever. You go and search, right? It's in the term search. You go and search. Well, the problem with that is you only search for things that you've lost. So what they've been working on for years and years and years is how to prompt, how to push things to you in real time, right? Oh, Alan's working on this. I think you might need to see this or that, right? That underpins up. That's pretty much the same conversation we're having around agentic.
And we remarked, that we've had more inquiries from vendors, particularly startup vendors, who are talking about use cases that we may remember as being very much enterprise search type use cases in the last 6 months than we had in the previous 15 years. Now, some of this is prompted by, they're another area that's been sort of turbocharged with the availability of transformers and all the stuff that came after that. So they're following in the same technological wake as LMMs. But I got up on screen, I think it was last week, it's 3rd of February, so very just over a week ago, Sam Altman from OpenAI was prompting a new OpenAI product, a product for use, on the basis that it helped him find a used car, or particularly used car he was looking for, a supercar, an NSX in Japan, and saying this is wonderful, what technology you can do now. This is a pretty basic search use case. Right.
Yeah, and the reality is, when we think of search, I guess we do think of looking for a lost document or whatever, or lost something, right? But the reality is, search has played, or the search technology, I should say, has played a critical role in knowledge management, in service desks, help desks, servicing customer queries. It's the same use cases. Use cases. The sad side of this is that the search vendors just really don't get much love, do they? Never have.
They don't. And certainly, I think that's what's kind of important to mention about all of those new briefings we're getting. They're not coming to us as search. They're coming to us with far more utility, funnily enough, attached to them than search used to. And I think that's in part because you're not going to roll up with a pitch deck that says search on it to a VC. You're going to want to come up with something.
You're going down a sad path if you think you can go and sell somebody enterprise search. At the same time, what enterprise search vendors have is decades of experience of working with legacy systems, of working with people's messy data, of understanding use cases. And I'll put it out there, I genuinely think I'm not going to name names here, but there's a bunch of search vendors out there that should be acquired.
Yeah.
They should be acquired because that knowledge and technology combined will absolutely fast forward somebody's agentic ambitions.
Yeah, and I think that the why that hasn't worked before as a subject, I don't want to get into now, but I think it'd be really interesting to go back, perhaps. But although again, I guess it's one of those situations where I'm not sure how much you and I discussed in the old days of enterprise search is of interest to people watching or listening to the podcast, for that matter, as much as it is interesting for you and I to have the discussion. But you're right. Just to call back sort of slightly what you said before, I've always said there's two broad search modes: recover and discover. Now, an awful lot what we're seeing in the first section about access to data is not discover. It's not the discovery thing. It's the finding stuff that people already know exists, and that is most searches.
Yeah,
they're relatively low value, but they're enormously frequent. So most things are that. And I think that's mainly what people are talking about in terms of access to data. That discovery thing, does a thing exist or does not exist, is a small number, but tends to be quite precise and also quite high value in terms of the value of the outcome to the person asking the question. They're different tools often, or should almost be different tools sometimes. And you can almost compare them. We talked last time about deterministic versus probabilistic within agents, where most business things are deterministic. Well, this is similar. Most searches, right, are searching for something that they know exists, not working on the probability of whether it exists or not. So right. they're kind of similar breakouts, really.
Yeah, and just finally on that, Martin White, who is the real search expert.
Oh yeah,
I search expert. Down to him, I'm nothing in comparison. But I do remember some years ago, he showed the findings from a big consulting job they did, where they basically trawl through, I think, the log files of a search engine at a huge European corporation, and the #1 search term that was typed in by employees was a single word: intranet.
Yeah.
So they went to the search engine to find their company's intranet.
I'm back in around, I think about 2008, 2009, when I wrote a lot about it. The #1 search on the UK Google Trends was Facebook login.
Yep.
And it's exactly the same use case. One's public, one's with the organization. But it's a fairly basic thing. Something that could be solved with a button, or understanding the URL bar, which of course nobody does, and the URL bar's kind of disappeared as a piece of function within browsers broadly anyway. So we can't really blame people for that. Just another call out while we've got up on screen here. We did not ignore the existence of DeepSeek, even though we're perhaps not as excited about models and the model market as other people. We didn't ignore that it happened. Alan wrote something about that, which is kind of interesting. Finally, I will just pull up this comment from Ed Zitron, who's somebody who's worth following, and certainly worth subscribing to his newsletter. Kind of scurrilous, but is also incredibly interesting. Where he says, today we at Google have a new product. What if you could ask an app a question? Oh, we do that already? What if you're a bit worse at it? What if it also gave you egregiously wrong information? And what if it cost $1 billion? What then? Which is an interesting review, perhaps, of the Gemini AI-generated searches at the top of each Google research search right now. That's his opinion and not ours, but I know mine probably doesn't differ enormously from that.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing around DeepSeek in particular, and the whole search thing is the fact that they've proven that you don't need the billions. It's not really whether it's any better or worse in giving you answers to your questions.
If you could do something 30 times cheaper, now I'm listening, because I know what that means in terms of utility.
That is the big message there. Yeah.
So onto our final topic. We covered this last time. We enjoyed doing it so much that we're going to flash ourselves to do it again. Next month, Dan's going to be on. I'm going to ask Dan. Then we will wrap them up and we'll put a blog post out with everybody's suggestions on this, which was analyst value. For those of you who didn't hear last time, last year we talked a lot about, things that vendors do on briefings, which are good and bad, things that vendors do at conferences were good and bad. And we thought things that we do as our industry, which are good or bad, we should do the same, only to be fair. So I broke this into two broad categories previously. One was areas where analysts definitely increase value. You can see there's a happy cat on the screen. It's happy because value is being increased. Last time I said my big thing of increasing value might be blindingly obvious, but it's a big portion of what you pay for with analysts is the being able to bring together and collect and collate and regurgitate, or maybe something that feels a little bit less base than that, but to synthesize, that's the right word, to synthesize everything that's going on in your peers globally and then package it back to you. This is a really important thing that they had in there. Alan's suggestion for how we the increasing in value was the variety of different experiences, and he referenced going to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different vendor conferences back to back, and being able to synthesize that information for subscribers. We've got 2 new ones this month. I'm going to come to your one second, Alan, because it's a bit more profound than mine. But my one to add to the end user insights of last time is, do not underestimate how super specialists some analyst firms are. Now, you know that we're specialists in our area of unstructured data automation. Not that we ever find a shortage of things to talk about in this podcast, but still, we're still super specialists. Whatever small specialism, all of a sudden you have been asked to look for within your, to trawl for a vendor, to find a solution, to find out what other people are doing. There is an analyst, independent potentially, or maybe working for a big firm, who just looks at that, just lives in that world. So that's something which you're never going to have the time, let alone the expertise, but just the time in the first case to be able to be a super specialist as that person locked away in a small office like mine, only doing that thing 365 days a year. And that's what I think is an important piece of value. Alan, telling the truth.
Telling the truth. We on briefings, we're often the first people who tell somebody that their baby isn't as pretty as they thought it was. That's a little harsh, but we've got to that. We should be purveyors of the truth. I mean, it's a thin line to tread at times, and not everybody wants to hear it, right? But if somebody's taking something to market and they're showing it to us, and it's incumbent on us to say that won't work. Try something else. We're not there to go, aren't you clever? That's not our job. That is not our role. Our role is to tell you, and you are probably, if you're briefing us, at very least a product manager or the CEO of the company. Nobody else is going to tell you this. Right? And sometimes it is hard. I've had conversations, Dan's had conversations, you've had conversations with startups, like really early stage startups, who tell us they're doing something unique. It's our job to tell them, no, you're not. That's not unique. There's 100 other vendors out there that maybe you haven't heard of, and so it can be tough, and it's not always fun. But I think it can deliver immense value when a super specialized analyst who actually knows what they're talking about, right? Can tell you the hard truth.
And I guess also at the same time can pick out, I turn so positive about to pick out the part of your pitch which really resonates. So that for next time, that's what to lead with. I'd be overweight on that idea and underweight on the other, which is a nice way of saying ignore the other one. Just talk about that.
Very often, over the course of the year, I don't know how many times I do it, but people will, and if you're a deep analysis client, you should be doing this. When you're doing a big presentation, a keynote at your conference or whatever, show us the slides. Go through them first with us. Every time we will do just exactly what you said. Okay, why is this on slide 6? This is your message. This is what because there's a tendency to prioritize the things that you spent the most money and time on.
Well, we did a job earlier this year. It was actually this time last year, which is how time flies, for a vendor, which was a marketing review. And actually what we found was buried in their site was all this golden stuff which they'd forgotten they'd made. We hadn't forgotten they made it. We'd never seen it before, and went, this stuff in the background should be in the foreground. And they were like, oh, we hadn't really thought of that before. And again, that was just a fresh pair of eyes. And plus with a combined 70 years in the software industry, I think about that. So it helped us to be able to do that. But yeah, that sort of fresh pair of eyes on things to be able to give you, and also we don't have a vested interest in not offending you, polite as we are, we will tell you the truth, unburnished, as it were. So Sad Cat says reducing value. Okay, these aren't necessarily quite as serious as the first ones. Last time Alan talked about hype and how we are all guilty of being on the hype train for things far too early and ringing the bell or tooting the horn, whichever indication device the hype train has, doing that. And we get wrapped up in that a little bit. I was more specific. I said analysts that write only time will tell in their analysis. And I think we both admitted we've probably done that in the past. So this time, Alan, invented numbers.
This just drives me crazy. I mean, we kicked off this podcast with survey data, right?
Yeah.
Proper methodology, proper panel, properly ethically done, right? Same. So both you and Dan are working on market forecasts. I'll give that as an example, right? I mean, actual numbers that are actually counted. I mean, it's basic stuff, isn't it? Right? Yeah. This is how big this market is, and this is our prediction of how it will grow. Right? So two things: one, a set of facts. Yep. This is the size of the market, and two, which is analysis, which could turn out to be right or wrong. We think it'll be right, but we don't know. It's in the future. Just recently, and you can go and trawl these on I get them on Google alerts all the time. There are just companies out there who make numbers up, right? And it really, I find it's wrong. It's just wrong on every level, right?
Oh, yeah. So I'm thinking specifically about the ones you showed me the day before yesterday.
That said that the market was going to be $24 billion. That market, it's not even $2 billion as of today. How do you get to $24 billion? If you add up the entire revenues of the companies that they apparently, allegedly counted, you don't get to a fraction of that number. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And it's more than nonsense. It's dangerous. People raise money on the basis of those kind of things, right? And they're wrong. They're just wrong. And I'm not usually one who will jump up and down and cheer for investors, right? They're not the most popular group of people around, but it's just wrong.
Yeah.
Honestly, there's nothing much you can do about it. But there are, and I'm not going to name them, but there are a bunch of so-called analyst firms out there. They're not analyst firms. They're just research mills. They just churn stuff out and they put big numbers on it because they want to sell the report. The trouble is, some people believe those numbers.
They do, and we hear them back. And I always go, whenever I see numbers quoted, the first place I go is down to the superscript at the bottom of the PR and find out whose numbers they are and when they are, and then go and find the methodology for those numbers to find out whether I should take them seriously or whether I should put them in the bin. And 9 times out of 10, they need to go in the bin.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of them around. They flood the market. And by the way, as the founder of Deep Analysis, it's pretty annoying that that's considered our competition. In fact, it's insulting. They're not analyst companies, and these numbers, and they know the numbers are wrong. That's the other thing. It's not that they're not very good at their job. They just make the numbers up.
So mine in this case, just because conscious that we're already over time slightly, because we always are over time because we pack this stuff into these apparent 30 minutes. Last time I said analysts that say only time will tell, and I'm going to add to this one, analysts that say X is dead. It's very rare that anything in the software industry is dead. Really, the previous conversation only a few minutes ago about search by search, nothing is dead. It may lay dormant. It may appear to be dead, but actually be very active inside most organizations. But people aren't actively selling it that hard, but things are very rarely, if ever, dead. And a lot of what we're seeing now around AI and agentic and automation is based on certainly treatises as 40, 50 years old, but often underlying technology schemas, which are actually that length of time as well. So things don't necessarily ever die. They come back to life, perhaps being hauled along by a more exciting, shinier hype train than previously.
Yeah, and that's all it is. Fortran's still alive, COBOL's still alive. 30-year-old ERP systems are still alive.
If you're starting to mess around in the guts of the code that runs the US government, you're going to find you're going to need COBOL scores pretty quickly.
Otherwise, it's going to be a real big mess.
Yeah, and on that chilling vision of things to come, that kind of wraps up that topic, and it wraps up this episode of We Love Obligator. Thank you for joining us. Next time, 3 more topics, approximately 30 minutes to discuss them in. Thanks again for joining us, Alan.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us and listening to us or watching us. And we hope you join us again. Thank you. Cheers.